Buried beneath the endless dunes, wiped from the earth in a single moment, this was the fate of Iram, the city of pillars. The Qur'an speaks of its people, the mighty Ad, who ruled the land with wealth and power. Their city stood tall, unmatched, its towering columns reaching for the sky. But arrogance consumed them. They defied their lord, believing themselves untouchable. And then the punishment came. A storm of destruction, fierce and unrelenting, erased them without a trace. Their city, gone. Their people, cursed. The Thamud followed, struck down by an earthquake, and their homes shattered into dust. For centuries, travelers spoke of Iram as a legend, a ghost city swallowed by the sands. But was it just a myth, or did something truly lie beneath the desert? In this video, we will dive deep into the search for the lost city of Iram. Deep in the Arabian desert, where the sands stretch endlessly and the heat is merciless, there's a story that has refused to die. It has been whispered for centuries, passed down through generations, appearing in ancient texts and religious scriptures. A city of power and wealth, built with towering pillars so advanced that even the great empires of history marveled at its existence. And then, gone. Buried, erased, wiped off the face of the earth by something so catastrophic that even today, its remains are nowhere to be found. They call it Iram, the city of pillars. Explorers have searched for it, scholars have debated its existence, and the stories surrounding it have taken on an almost mythical quality. Some say it was a kingdom blessed with riches beyond belief, trading in spices and gold. Others say it was a city cursed by the heavens, punished for its arrogance and sins. But whether you believe the legends or not, one thing is clear: Iram has been part of history for a very long time. T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, was obsessed with the idea of finding this lost city. He believed it was buried somewhere in the Rub al-Khali, the vast desert known as the Empty Quarter. If you've ever heard of it, think of it as the ultimate no man's land. It covers 660,000 square kilometers, stretching across Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the UAE. It's the largest continuous sand desert in the world, and one of the hottest places on the planet, and almost completely uninhabited. Rain? Barely 35 millimeters per year, less than the Sahara, and only slightly more than the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth. A city existing here? Sounds impossible, but the desert wasn't always like this. Thousands of years ago, the Arabian Peninsula looked very different. During the late Pleistocene, between 2.6 million and 11,700 years ago, this land was green. Rivers flowed, lakes formed, and large animals like hippos and water buffalo roamed freely. Later, during the Arabian Neolithic period, 8,000 to 4,400 BCE, the region experienced another wet phase called the Holocene climactic optimum. But then, the shift began. The climate dried up, and by 1550 BCE, the desertification process had accelerated, partly due to human activity. Over-farming and deforestation destabilized the land, and strong winds carried the sand, burying whatever stood in its path. By the 6th century BCE, much of the region had turned into the lifeless expanse we see today. But was it really empty? Not quite. Archaeologists have found evidence of advanced settlements near long-lost oases, proving that even as the land became more hostile, people continued to live here. And if we look at historical records, we see that this region wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The Assyrians, as early as 680 BCE, recognized Arabia as a land of wealth. Their kings, Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal, launched military campaigns to control the trade routes, looking to profit from the riches of the desert. By 430 BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus had documented Arabia as the world's leading supplier of spices. Frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, these weren't just used for perfumes or rituals. These were luxury goods, fueling entire economies. And where there was trade, there was power. By the time of the Roman Empire, around 25 BCE, the demand for these goods had exploded. Rome was importing nearly 3,000 tons of frankincense every year, much of it coming from the Dhofar Mountains in modern Oman. Traders transported it across the desert, following routes that led straight through the Empty Quarter. And right in the middle of this trade network, a city appeared on maps. In 150 CE, the Egyptian geographer Claudius Ptolemy marked a settlement in the region, calling it Omanum Emporium, the Omani marketplace, a trade hub. perfectly positioned along the ancient spice routes. A place that, when compared to the old stories, sounds a lot like Iram. And then, just like that, it was gone. No records, no mentions, nothing. A city that once stood at the heart of Arabian trade vanished without explanation. For centuries, the only traces of its existence came from scattered legends, but then it reappeared in poetry. A verse from the 6th century CE mentions Iram alongside the tribe of Ad. The Ad were known as a mighty people, ruling southern Arabia for generations. But according to the Qur'an, they met a terrible fate. Chapter 89, verses 6 to 14, describes Iram as a city with towering pillars, unmatched by anything else in the land. Its people, the Ad, were strong but arrogant. They defied their lord, believing themselves invincible. Then, disaster struck. A storm, a punishment, a force so great that it erased them from existence. A city lost in the sands. Could this be based on real events? Could Iram have been destroyed by natural disaster? Or was it something else, something even more devastating? The story of Iram doesn't end with its destruction. In fact, it only gets stranger. The people of Ad weren't the only ones said to have faced divine punishment. According to the Qur'an, another ancient tribe, the Thamud, met a similar fate. The Thamud were a powerful civilization that flourished after the Ad. But just like their predecessors, they fell into corruption, defying the teachings of their prophet. The punishment? A massive earthquake that wiped them out. But here's where things get interesting. The poet Labid, writing in the 7th century, mentioned Iram and the Ad alongside the Thamud, almost as if they shared the same doom. Was he simply drawing from the Qur'an, or was he referencing older sources? No one knows. What we do know is that for centuries, people couldn't let go of the idea that Iram existed. The lost city kept showing up, again and again, in religious texts, poetry, and even folklore. One of the most intriguing stories comes from the Hadith, the collected sayings and traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. In one account, a scholar named Ka'b al-Akbar, a Yemeni Jew who converted to Islam in the 7th century, shared a remarkable tale. He spoke of a man named Abdullah who had lost his camel in the deserts of Yemen. While searching for it, he stumbled upon something incredible, the lost city of Iram. But this wasn't a ruin swallowed by sand. It was a city gleaming with gold and silver, decorated with precious gems. And ruling over it, a king named Shaddad, from the tribe of Ad. According to legend, Shaddad had lived for centuries, his kingdom untouched by time. The story doesn't mention the city's destruction, only its hidden nature. This version of Iram wasn't a doomed place. It was a mystical wonder, hidden away from ordinary men. Fast forward to the 11th century and the tale took on a life of its own. It became part of 1001 Nights, also known as Arabian Nights, one of the most famous collections of folklore in the world. But now, the city was called Iram of the Many Pillars. In one version, a 340-year-old man living in a cave claims to have survived both the destruction of Ad and the Thamud because he accepted monotheism. Another story, Saif al-Muluk and Badiat, turns Iram into a paradise. The hero falls in love with a princess named Badiat, a supernatural being, and the two live happily ever after in the Garden of Iram. The idea of Iram as a paradise wasn't new. Some later legends claim that King Shaddad built the city as an imitation of heaven itself. He wanted to create paradise on earth, and for that, he and his people were punished. After their downfall, the people of Iram weren't destroyed. According to these legends, they were transformed. Some versions say they became jinn, supernatural beings of Islamic folklore. Others describe them as strange creatures with a single eye, one arm, and one leg, cursed to wander the world. For centuries, these stories kept the legend of Iram alive. Explorers, treasure hunters, and scholars all wanted to know, was it real? One of the earliest recorded attempts to locate Iram came from the famous Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta. This man traveled farther than Marco Polo, covering the Islamic world from Spain to China over a period of 30 years. In 1329, he visited Oman and wrote about a place half a day's journey east of Mansoura, which he called the abode of Ad. Was he talking about Iram? Mansoura, now known as Salalah, sits on the coast of Oman, just south of the Darfur Mountains, the heart of ancient frankincense production. If Iram had been a major trade hub, this location made perfect sense. Interest in the Lost City surged again in the early 20th century, especially among British explorers. One of the most famous was Harry St. John Philby, an intelligence officer and expert in Arabian culture. During World War I, he worked as a political officer for the British and used his position to explore the desert. In 1917, while traveling near the Aflaj Oasis on the northern edge of the empty quarter, he found ruins that local Bedouins called the Palace of Ad. Philby wasn't convinced. The ruins seemed too recent, built after the 11th century. His guides told him that the real capital of Ad, which they called Ubar, lay further south, across the empty quarter near Yemen. Philby searched, but he never found it. A decade later, British diplomat Bertram Thomas took up the search. He became the first European to cross the empty quarter from east to west and relied on Bedouin guides who spoke of a buried city. They described it as the great city of old, rich in treasure, with date gardens and a fort made of red silver. They even pointed out a path on a map that would lead to it, right where the borders of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman meet. But Thomas never completed the journey. For the next 50 years, Iram remained a mystery. Then, in 1981, an unexpected group took up the search. A Los Angeles filmmaker and NASA scientists. Nicholas Clapp, a documentarian with a passion for history, learned about Iram while filming in Oman. He became obsessed with finding it. His first step? He contacted the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the JPL, operated by NASA, and proposed an unusual idea: using satellite imaging to look for ancient ruins buried beneath the sand. At first, JPL scientists thought he was crazy, but Clapp wasn't wrong. Satellite technology could reveal patterns in the desert that weren't visible from the ground, and when they scanned the area, they found something remarkable: a network of ancient trade routes converging on a single point. That point? A small settlement called Shisr. Clapp assembled a team that included explorer Sir Ranulph Fiennes, rare book curator Alan Jutzi, and archaeologist Juris Zarins. They traveled to Shisr in 1990, searching for evidence. What they found was astonishing. Beneath the sands lay the remains of an ancient octagonal fortress with 8 towers, high walls, and carefully plastered interiors. The site showed clear signs of being a major trading post, possibly a stopping point for frankincense caravans heading north. Even more incredible, they discovered that the city had been destroyed by a natural disaster. Sometime around the 2nd or 3rd century CE, an underground limestone cavern beneath the city collapsed, swallowing entire sections into the earth. It was an event so sudden and devastating that it forced the city's abandonment. Could this be the disaster described in the ancient texts? Zarins estimated the ruins dated back at least 3,000 years, possibly older. They found artifacts from Greece, Rome, and Syria, proof that this was once a major center of trade. But was it Iram? Clapp and Fiennes believed so. Some scholars disagreed. Islamic historians argue that Iram may have never been a physical city, but rather a poetic reference to the lost tribe of Ad. Others suggest it might be Wadi Rum in Jordan. Even Zarins had doubts. He knew that they had discovered something important, one of the oldest known trading hubs in Arabia. But was it the Iram? That question remains unanswered, and maybe in the end, it doesn't matter. The legend of Iram inspired centuries of exploration, from medieval scholars to modern archaeologists. Whether it was a real city or just a powerful myth, its influence shaped history. It led to the discovery of lost settlements, revealed hidden trade routes, and reshaped our understanding of Arabia's past. A city may vanish under the sands, but its story never truly disappears. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. And if you have theories about Iram, let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.